Fox 2 presents Hancock and Kelley.
Welcome to Hancock and Kelley here on Fox 2. On the right is John Hancock.
Morning, everyone.
Good morning, sir. And on the left is Michael Kelley.
Morning.
And I'm John Brown. Let's begin with a wrap-up of the DNC.
On their convention's final night, Democrats looking to the future.
Recovery is only possible with a change of leadership and new ideas.
This November, let's move forward and never look back.
Joe Biden is right. This is a contest for the soul of the nation.
And in accepting his party's presidential nomination, Joe Biden arguing he can best lead the nation through the challenges of the present.
In times as challenging as these, I believe there's only one way forward. As a united America, a united America.
Biden's nomination adding another achievement to a Washington resume that spans nearly 5 decades. That resume is an area where President Trump, campaigning in Biden's hometown of Scranton, Pennsylvania Thursday, has indicated he'll take aim.
He's been there for 47 years, and now he's going to come in and make a change. I don't think so.
Top Democrats slammed Trump's White House tenure in their convention speeches this week as part of their call for change.
Donald Trump hasn't grown into the job because he can't.
I wish Donald Trump knew how to be a president.
Donald Trump is the wrong president for our country.
Biden Thursday adding to those voices, underscoring the importance of this election.
This is our moment. This is our mission. May history be able to say that the end of this chapter of American darkness began here tonight.
In Wilmington, Delaware, I'm Karen Kafa.
All right, Michael, it was your party. Your thoughts, first of all, on Joe Biden's speech.
Well, I thought the speech was great, and it was important that it wasn't all about Donald Trump. He laid out his vision and what change looked like to him. But the culmination of this entire week, look, these conventions, and we're going to witness this next week with the Republicans, are essentially a giant commercial for the nominee and for the party that's having their convention. The Democrats, in this unprecedented time of having to do everything online, had a fabulous convention. And not only was the historic speech of Kamala Harris and Joe Biden's acceptance what stood out to me, but the starkness and the warning that former President Obama offered about how Donald Trump has not shown an ability to do this job, and making the case that we must make a change for our democracy. It was a good week to be a Democrat.
You know, John, one thing that popped into my head, it was a good speech. Even Republicans admit it was a good speech, but you know, his opponents will tell you that Joe Biden is an empathetic person. That's true, but that's not why Trump was elected. His people elected him because they wanted someone who would talk back to foreign leaders, because they'll tell you they were tired of American leaders who were apologizing for the success of America. Does that make any sense? They didn't want a guy who was empathetic. They wanted a guy who would talk back for a change.
Yeah, and Donald Trump certainly has delivered in that regard. Here's where I'm afraid this election is going to come down to the economy. And the prescriptions on the economy that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are offering, higher taxes, more regulation, government take over the healthcare system, those are not recipes that are going to cook well with the American people. Now, Biden, if you look at the polls, he may be winning the election right now. But when people focus in on the economy and Donald Trump's vision of what the economy looks like and contrast that to Joe Biden's vision, I think this race is going to tighten up considerably.
You know, Michael, one thing I did see, and I was looking at my own personal Facebook page, right? I have friends who are on both sides of the aisle. And the one thing I did notice, which I thought was interesting, is people said it was nice to have somebody who talks civility for a change. So obviously that resonated. I think what Trump does, some people like it, but it's been 3.5 years of a lot of bombast. So I do think there's some fatigue of that.
Well, it's been 3.5 years. 170,000 Americans have died, an economy that's plummeted, racial unsettling strife going on throughout the entire country, no leadership, an abandonment of our allies. I think people want some semblance of normalcy back. There's no doubt about it. Donald Trump said, I'm going to be the president who rocks the boat. Well, he's capsized the boat. It's time to bring back in a captain who actually knows how to charter a boat, rather than somebody who's wanting to play one on TV.
You know, it's interesting because you guys had Claire McCaskill on your show, I guess, a week ago, and she made an interesting point about how it used to be people like to stay the course. In this day and age of social media, John, people seem to like change. We saw what happened with Lacey Clay. You know, people like change for whatever reason. We like to see the boat rocked at this point. That doesn't bode well for a Trump.
Well, you just look at how many times Congress has flipped back and forth in the last 20 years. You know, we had gone decades without seeing Congress turn over one party to the other. So there is a sense in which the American people vote for change, and there's also a sense in which the American people are restless, kind of drifting all over the place. At the end of the day, though, most elections are about the economy. And I think the more people focus in on the economy, what's our tax situation going to be? Are we able to find jobs in the economy once we get through this coronavirus? I think that is Donald Trump's single best hope to win re-election.
That is one interesting interpretation when we've watched 20% of Americans be out of business, a president spending unwildly with big corporations, leaving people who are unemployed out in the cold. John, that's one heck of a spin. I hope this election's about the economy. If that's the case, Donald Trump's going back to wherever he says he's from.
And by the way, here's what President Trump thought of the DNC. Listen to this one.
But over the last week, the Democrats held the darkest and angriest and gloomiest convention in American history. They spent 4 straight days attacking America as racist and a horrible country that must be redeemed.
All right, John, your thoughts on that one?
Well, I mean, it was a very negative convention. Most of the negativity was focused on Donald Trump. You do that when you're the out party. But you've also got to present a vision for the future. And the problem the Democrats have is that the policy prescriptions that they have across the board are not popular. And the party continues to drift more and more and more to the left. And I don't see that trend stopping anytime soon. Joe Biden has been pulled markedly to the left throughout this process, and he's picked a very, very liberal running mate. Those policy prescriptions are not popular with the American people.
I'm not sure which convention both Donald Trump and John Hancock watched. It wasn't a negative campaign about America. It spoke to the soul of America and how we can tackle problems when we have proper leadership. Yes, there was a lot of attacks on Donald Trump. This is Donald Trump's America that we're living in. 170,000 dead Americans for a virus that could have been controlled, an economy that has spiraled under the leadership of Donald Trump. Now, he may want to call that a negative feeling as it relates to the country, but no, the anger and the negativity is directed at the person in the White House who has failed. And this idea that John wants to keep painting and that Donald Trump wants to keep painting that the Democrats are extremists, this is a party that's arguing to go back to normalcy. We've lived under an extreme agenda, and it's killed 170,000 of us.
All right, one more bite here. On the same day that Joe Biden accepted the nomination, President Trump went to Biden's home state of Pennsylvania. Big crowd there. A lot of his bread and butter topics he talked about. One thing in particular, though, that he hit on there was mail-in voting. Here's what he said about that.
This is just a way they're trying to steal the election, and everybody knows that, because the only way they're going to win is by a rigged election. I really believe that.
Okay, I find it curious. He's talking about some of the things like a rigged election. He says maybe we're not going to know the results on Election Day. John, he seems to be setting the stage in case maybe things don't go his way, that he has some maybe excuses is maybe a word. Is that how you're seeing it here?
Well, in most of the country where you have absentee voting and mail-in voting, it's conducted very well, and it's been happening for decades. In some cases over 100 years, where you've had absentee voting by mail. The states that send out ballots across the board without the voter requesting them, that is a problem. And Nevada stands out among them for that kind of an approach. That does concern me, because when you've got ballots hitting people's mailboxes on the same day without having been requested, I mean, that's a recipe for people to, you know, run through neighborhoods and go grab up a bunch of ballots and send them in. But we're going to know the results of the election. We're going to know them on election night. And, you know, I don't fear some kind of a rigged election here.
Michael.
Yeah, well, this is Donald Trump 2016 all over again. He said the exact same things. When you have the facts, argue the facts. When you don't have them, argue like hell. Say the process is rigged. Donald Trump has failed miserably. He's not out talking about his solutions to fix our country. Instead, he's attacking the institutions and trying to tear democracy apart and say that the reason that he's going to lose is not because of his failure, not because of the loss of 170,000 Americans, but some fantasy he's cooked up in his own head.
All right, still to come on Hancock and Kelley, another Trump insider seeing the inside of a jail cell. Now, the irony here is the people who were convinced that Mexico was going to build a wall were sending money to the man to fund the building of a wall, even though he was telling them that Mexico was going to build the wall, but that guy bought a boat and plastic surgery with the money that was supposed to build the wall that Mexico was supposed to build. Is it clear? Make any sense? We'll debate that one straight ahead.